It was 6:45 a.m. at the towering headquarters of Stratacore Tech, one of Silicon Valley's most powerful software firms. The glass skyscraper reflected the first rays of sunrise, but inside, tension was already brewing. The halls were silent, except for the soft humming of vacuum cleaners and the echo of mops being dragged across polished floors. Luis Alvarez, a 56-year-old janitor with streaks of grey in his hair and calloused hands, was finishing his shift. He wiped sweat from his brow and sighed, ready to grab a cup of vending machine coffee and clock out. Wearing a faded blue jumpsuit, Luis blended so seamlessly into the background that most executives barely noticed he existed. Except today, Luis noticed something no one else did. As he was cleaning the executive floor, the glow from one of the computer screens caught his eye. It shouldn't have been on. Curious, he walked over to the desk. It was Mr. Hawthorne's, the company's sharp-suited, no-nonsense CEO. The monitor flashed red. System breach. Core server compromised. Luis's brow furrowed. He glanced around. No one was there yet. He leaned closer. The breach alert was accessing something called Vault 7 protocols, the most sensitive internal data Stratacore held. Proprietary code, unreleased software blueprints, and federal government contracts. Luis didn't panic. Instead, he sat down slowly and reached into the side pocket of his uniform. Out came a small USB stick. Nothing fancy, just his own little toolkit with old diagnostic programs he had created long ago, because what no one at Stratacore knew was that Luis wasn't always a janitor. 10 years ago, he had been a senior systems engineer in another state. He had built firewalls for defense agencies and designed encryption algorithms that were still used in secure banking systems. But a wrongful conviction, later overturned, had destroyed his career. He'd taken the janitor job at Stratacore just to pay the bills. No one ever bothered to ask about his past, and he never volunteered it. Now, as the breach spread rapidly across the servers, Luis opened the task manager, navigated through layers of code like a surgeon, and located the intrusion point. His eyes widened. This wasn't random. It was an inside job. The malicious code had been disguised as a system update and activated remotely. Whoever designed it had access to the CEO's admin credentials, and they had masked the trail with military-level obfuscation. Whoever it was wanted to destroy Stratacore from within. Luis typed fast. His fingers flew over the keyboard with the precision of someone who hadn't forgotten his old life. He initiated a sandbox protocol, isolating the infected nodes before they could reach the wider network. The system groaned under the strain, but it held, barely. Then, just as he was about to initiate a full lockout, a voice called from behind him. "What the hell are you doing?" Luis turned to find a tall man in a dark suit, Tom Granger, the company's head of cybersecurity. Granger's expression was livid. "Step away from the computer," he ordered. Luis calmly unplugged his USB stick. "There's a breach in your core system. I was stopping it," Granger scoffed. "And you think I'm going to believe that a janitor was saving the company?" Before Luis could respond, the CEO himself, Marcus Hawthorne, walked in, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. "What's going on here?" Granger pointed accusingly. "This man was at your computer. He says he was stopping a breach. For all we know, he caused it." Luis stood. "Sir, your system was under attack. I isolated the breach and prevented full server compromise. Check your logs." Hawthorne, skeptical, walked over and examined the logs. His face went pale. "Jesus, he's right." He scrolled through the data, time-stamped firewall pings, traced IP logs, sandbox entries, all pointing to the exact moment the breach had begun and when it was contained. Who are you?" Luis stood quietly, hands behind his back. "Just a janitor who used to write code. I saw something was wrong and I acted." Granger turned red. "You expect us to believe this? Anyone could fake that data." But Hawthorne wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the screen, lips pursed, mind racing. He tapped a button on his phone. "Get my boardroom ready, now, and bring this man with me." Luis Alvarez sat uncomfortably at the far end of the massive glass conference table, his blue jumpsuit a stark contrast to the suits and tailored dresses of the Stratacore executive board. The CEO, Marcus Hawthorne, stood at the head of the room, pacing silently as his inner circle buzzed in confusion. No one knew exactly why the janitor had been summoned to an emergency meeting, until Hawthorne cleared his throat. "We were nearly taken down today," he said grimly. "Our core systems were under an active cyber attack, and it wasn't our $5 million cybersecurity team that caught it." The room froze. It was him. Hawthorne pointed to Luis. Chairs turned. Executives blinked. Luis looked down, unsure if he should speak. "He identified the breach," Hawthorne continued, "isolated the source, prevented a total collapse of our IP infrastructure. Then, after a pause, he saved this company." Tom Granger, head of cybersecurity, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "With all due respect, sir, we can't be sure he didn't cause the attack. How can a janitor even access your computer?" Luis finally spoke. His voice was calm but resolute. "I didn't hack anything. I saw your screen flashing red. I knew what it meant. I acted. You can verify every command I entered, check the logs. And what gives you the knowledge to do that?" Another exec sneered. "Mopping floors gives you access to state-level encryption skills." Luis took a breath. "Before I was here, I was the lead architect of West Coast Defense's firewall project. I built 3 of the core systems your firm now licenses. But after a false conviction that ruined my name, I took whatever job I could find. This one let me work nights, stay under the radar, and support my family." The room was stunned. A few looked ashamed. Granger opened his mouth again, but Hawthorne held up a hand. "Enough." He turned to Luis. "Can you prove what you just said?" Luis nodded. "I still have my clearance records and the original code footprints. I've never stopped writing, even if no one paid me to." Hawthorne rubbed his chin. "Then let me ask you something. Can you trace where the attack came from?" Luis nodded again. "I already did." He plugged in his USB stick and projected a heat map of IP traces onto the boardroom screen. The attack was launched from an encrypted virtual machine routed through 5 countries. But the origin node is right here. "Inside this building," Luis continued. "It came from a terminal in your R&D lab, and it used admin credentials. Only 2 people have access to. One of them is Mr. Granger." All heads turned to the cybersecurity chief. "That's ridiculous," Granger shouted. "I've been loyal to this company for years. I would never—" Luis tapped another key. A screen showed a security cam still. Granger entering the R&D lab at 2:47 a.m. the night before. "You were the only one on that floor at the time of the breach initiation." Granger's face collapsed. The room erupted. Security was called. As he was escorted out, Granger yelled, "You don't know what you've started." But Luis knew. Hawthorne sat down slowly, processing everything. He looked at Luis and spoke, not like a CEO, but like someone who'd just seen the ground shift beneath his feet. "You just saved us from losing everything." "What do you want?" Luis hesitated. "I just wanted to do the right thing." "That's admirable," Hawthorne said, "but I won't let that be the end of it." He stood and extended a hand. "How would you like to join Stratacore's executive security development team as a full-time senior analyst? With a salary 10 times what you make now?" Luis stared at the hand, stunned. His throat tightened. "You'd trust me after all this?" "I'd be a fool not to." The boardroom erupted in applause. For the first time in years, Luis felt seen, respected. Not as a janitor, but as the brilliant mind he'd once been, and still was. 3 weeks later, Luis Alvarez arrived at Stratacore's headquarters, this time wearing a charcoal grey suit and carrying a sleek laptop bag. His name was now on the 14th floor's glass wall, Luis Alvarez, Senior Systems Architect. He walked past the janitorial closet that had once been his break room. He smiled softly, remembering the mop bucket, the vending machine coffee, the long nights spent dreaming of redemption. He passed by some of the same executives who had once ignored him. Now they nodded in respect. In the elevator, he was joined by Marcus Hawthorne. "Still feels strange?" the CEO asked. Luis chuckled. "Feels like waking up in someone else's life." Hawthorne clapped him on the back. "No, Luis, you just finally stepped back into your own." As the elevator doors opened, Luis looked out at the buzzing office floor, filled with engineers, coders, and visionaries. This time, he belonged, and no one would ever overlook him again.